What we are not taught to expect in the midst of achievement and almost never given permission to feel is the very real grief that hides just beneath positive life milestones. Instead of seeing happy milestones only as wins, you had a baby, you graduated, you got married, yay. What if you also recognized the things that are being left behind? Hi there, and welcome back to Grief Grower. I am so honored to be with you here today, as always. If you have been growing alongside me in my work for a while, welcome back. And if you are new to me and my work, hi there. My name is Shelby Forsythia. I am a grief coach, 2-time, soon-to-be 3-time author, and the founder of Life After Loss Academy, which is an online course and community that has helped hundreds of grieving people stop feeling stuck and start moving forward, including building lives that they genuinely love from the lives that loss forced them to live. This, of course, includes not only death-related losses, but also losses like breakup and divorce, major diagnosis, and every single other major transition that changes your life. Here on Grief Grower, we believe that grief is not something that we're intended to get over. It is something that we grow with and alongside, and that when we stop treating grief less like a problem to be had and more like an invitation to live more deeply, we can build rich, beautiful, and meaningful lives that are integrated with the struggles that we faced. We get to tell the truth about everything that has ever happened to us, the good, the bad, and everything in between. I want to remind you of some events that are coming up before we get into the show today. If you are local to Chicago, you can join me this coming weekend, October 26th, for the Talk Death Scavenger Hunt that's happening at Graceland Cemetery. This is something that's happened in years past, and I am so honored to co-sponsor it with other death and grief care professionals here in Chicago. It is going to begin, the scavenger hunt officially begins at 1:30 p.m., but if you'd like to come sooner, we are doing things like cemetery walkthroughs where you can do the cemetery tour of Graceland and learn a bit about its history and the people who are buried there. And we'll also be doing some Q&A about death, dying, grief, and the importance of cemeteries in honoring our loved ones who have died, and why it is meaningful for those who are living to continue to visit cemeteries as the years go on. So I will be there. Angel Luna of the Death and Friends podcast will be there. Grace Robbins of Koi Metromania will be there, and Jensen Allen, the director of Graceland Cemetery, will be there as well. If you're just interested in the scavenger part, once again, join us there at 1:30, and the organization Talk Death will share a list of clues to find on Instagram and its website, and from that starting point, you have 45 minutes to find and photograph as many of the cemetery clues as you can before submitting your findings online, and then winners are announced 45 minutes after that start time. So we'll be looking for things around the cemetery like iconography on headstones, items that are commonly found in cemeteries, and then potentially interesting or unique names or dates. And Talk Death as an organization I know tries to keep clues inclusive of a wide variety of locations, because the cemetery scavenger hunt, if you're not in Chicago, is happening across the United States on October 26th. So you can look at Talk Death's website and find a cemetery scavenger hunt near you. And it also includes a lot of clues of different cultural backgrounds as well. So not every cemetery will have every clue, but you find as many as you can in the 45 minutes, and prizes will be awarded to whoever finds 13 clues first, the highest number of clues found, and accolades such as most creative photography. Just in case I didn't mention it, this event is free and open to the public. Registration is not required, but if you'd like to register and let me know you're coming, I would love to see you there, and you can find all the information to do that, plus more information about the lineup of the day, who else is going to be there, at shelbyforsythia.com/events. And it wouldn't be a spooky Talk Death event without some merch, so you will find Talk Death merch there, as well as other spooky items available for purchase. I would love to see you there, and all proceeds from this event benefit the Black Cemetery Network. And the next event I would love to see you at that I'm doing in person is the Grieftastic Book Fair. This is coming up on Friday, November 21st in LA. So if you're on the West Coast, I am coming to see you. This is just like the Scholastic Book Fair that you may remember from elementary or middle school as a child, but sadder. So myself and more than 40 grief authors are going to be live for one day only at the Lux Hotel in Los Angeles. And this is like a one-of-a-kind gathering devoted entirely to grief books. It's one of my favorite events to have have learned about in the past few years, and I'm so honored that my second book, Your Grief Your Way, was chosen to be featured at the Grieftastic Book Fair this year. So you will attend and enjoy an entire day full of conversations and panels, one of which I am leading, and immersive experiences that are all related to how we use words to talk about and describe our grief. And you will come away with a souvenir tote bag called a sad sack, which is one of my favorite things in the world, and just really have a day of connecting with other grieving people through the medium of books and writing. Other writers there, besides myself, include Rachel Cargill, Rebecca Sofer, who is a guest here on Grief Grower, David Kessler, Hope Edelman, and Jennifer Pasteloff. But there, of course, including myself, there are 40 plus authors that are going to be featured at the Grieftastic Book Fair. And that is happening Friday, November 21st, again in Los Angeles. It starts at 10, the VIP brunch if you want to come early and kind of rub elbows with all the authors that are there. And then the book fair itself, as well as a couple panels and things like that, I believe begin at noon. Of course, you can go to shelbyforsythia.com/events to read more details on this. And if you go to shelbyforsythia.com/events, you can get my code for the Grieftastic Book Fair, and that will give you 15% off whichever ticket you choose, whether you want the brunch and the book fair, or if you just want to come to the book fair. And for this event, all proceeds benefit an organization called Our House, which is a grief support center based in New York and LA. And if you're attending the Endwell conference in LA the day before, November 20th, you can also use the code GRIEW25 to save 15% on your ticket, and I will be at that event as well. I am not speaking this year, but I will be in the audience, so please come up, say hello. We can all sit around each other in the audience and talk about what we're learning as we listen to dozens and dozens of celebrities, end-of-life speakers, caregivers, people who are really thought leaders in the grief and end-of-life space tell us about what they're learning and what it is to be alive and to die and to end well right now in the year 2025. I would love to see you at any or all of these events, and do send me an email, shelby@shelbyforsythia.com, if you choose to come to any of these, and I'll be sure to be on the lookout for you. Okay. This week's episode is all about hidden grief, specifically the type of hidden grief that comes along when we accomplish something, when we succeed at something, when we achieve what I think a lot of society would consider a positive milestone. And this is something that really does not get talked about societally in big, overarching ways. And so I want to start the conversation here, very similar to the episode we did on meta grief about grieving. This is a conversation about like a grief that lives under the surface that a lot of people feel, but we are just now beginning to talk about as a society. So I'm hoping we can wrap some words around this together, and also maybe reframe some of the feelings you might have around life's biggest and most significant positive events that also contain grief. So I'm calling this episode something akin to Every Gain Includes Loss, the hidden grief of growth, success, achievement, and new beginnings, because we live in a culture that is really obsessed with progress. We are told constantly to be better and to do more and to keep going and reach for our dreams and achieve. And there's this relentless push to grow, as you may have heard me say in the past, like up and to the right, like a perfect line on a graph. And we're encouraged or sort of goaded or expected to chase new jobs, to get bigger and better homes, to have better relationships, whether romantic or platonic, to grow larger platforms, to achieve bigger wins, and to somehow manifest for ourselves brighter futures. And sometimes, I don't want to dunk on this too much, but sometimes we genuinely want to achieve success as society defines it. You are listening to somebody who has always wanted to be an author. I've wanted to write a book that lots and lots and lots of people read and achieve some level of writerly fame since I was 5. That is a goal that society would say, yes, that's a good and wonderful thing to do. Similar to wanting to graduate or wanting to have a baby or being the first in your lineage to have a master's degree or to open a business or to find love or win, literally or metaphorically, gold medals, blue ribbons for your talents or your hard work. These are things that many of us genuinely want. And I have read many places that part of being a human being is our unique ability to envision the future. We are able to not only reflect on things that have happened in the past and hold memory of that, but also to sort of extrapolate out in front of us of like, what could the future possibly look like? And to ponder, also consider, what achievements would mean the most to me? What defines a fulfilled and successful life for me? And it is true, and I don't want to discount this by publishing this episode into the world. It is true that any accomplishment of any of our goals is a good and valid reason for joy and pride and celebration. I want to say that right out of the gate here. But, and this is where the real crux of this episode lies, what we are not taught to expect in the midst of achievement and almost never given permission to feel is the very real grief that hides just beneath positive life milestones. As I said before, it is a form of hidden grief, and it lives inside of every gain. So I want to offer you sort of this new perspective that every beginning includes an ending. Every ending includes a beginning, and it's sort of a cyclical thing that feeds into each other. So instead of seeing, as society sees, happy milestones only as wins, you had a baby, you graduated, you got married, yay. What if you also recognized the things that are being left behind? And what if, as a society, we understood as a both and that accomplishments or major happy life milestones are celebrations, but they are also goodbyes, because that is what is actually happening in every single one of our lives. And I think it is possible to mourn success and to mourn changes that you very much wanted for yourself. This is a term I invented. I'm calling it gain grief, Gain, grief. And this is the heartachy sort of emotional residue that sits, that lives underneath positive milestones and achievements, even when the positive milestones and achievements are generally considered good. You're happy you did this. You wanted this for yourself. You chased it. You've been training for it your whole life. You've dreamt of it since you were a child. And sometimes there's grief underneath it. There's something that you've said goodbye to in order to make that true or make that possible in your life. But I think because it doesn't look like typical grief, no one has died, you haven't broken up with anybody, there's not a major diagnosis, no other major life transition in a negative sense has happened. Gain grief, this grief that comes with success, it like flies covertly under the radar, it like sneaks in the back door. And I've heard grieving people talk like, I'm irritable and I'm overwhelmed, or I'm feeling deflated. I feel like something's off, as they're sort of like gaslighting themselves into pretending that everything's fine and they're 100% happy that they've achieved this thing. You might feel like there's something about your milestone or event that's not being said, like a deeper truth or a larger portrait. Something's really going on, but you're not exactly sure what that might be. And the reality is, what is going on or what might be happening for you, if I can offer this, is the grief that comes with gain. And it is okay to feel things like that. And I want to say this is not like brokenness or you not being willing or able to see the positive, and it's not like a flaw in how you're wired as a human being. It is just real, normal, everyday loss, unacknowledged loss that is woven into growth. And I talk about it on the show a lot and my tagline is, even through grief we are growing. It is inevitable that we as humans grow. We grow, we change. That's how we know we're alive. Sometimes those changes are good, sometimes those changes are bad, and we have emotions around that accordingly. But a lot of what we don't recognize in categorizing changes as good or bad is that we forget that oftentimes good changes have goodbyes in them and bad changes have gains. And I'll get to that in a second. First, I want to give you some examples of like what this hidden gain grief looks like inside of life's wins and successes. And I want to see if any of this resonates for you, because it has certainly resonated with or has been brought up in my interactions with grieving clients and students. So here's some really common gains, successes. Yay, you did it. You would get a congratulations card for doing this, that come with layers of hidden grief. The first one I will say is graduation. So for instance, you are extraordinarily proud of your diploma. You might also be grieving your campus, your classmates, and your identity as a student. You might feel disoriented about who you are now that you're not in school. That is an identity. I am in school. And if you are no longer in school, well, what are you? You may grieve shifting from the certainty of classes and routines and scheduling for next semester to the uncertainty of like, well, here you go into the real world. And of course, you might also carry grief on behalf of your family or ancestors or friends who did not or could not, for whatever reason, have access to a college education. So you might be carrying grief that, in a way, belongs to other people as well. Second one I'll share with you is marriage. And love and celebration of love is extraordinarily real, and I would argue right now more important than ever. And what you may be grieving inside of marriage is the loss of singlehood or independence or living alone or not always sort of checking in about your whereabouts or what you're up to in the world or what time you'll be home. And in celebrating joining lives with another person, you are, in many ways, saying goodbye to freedoms or rituals from your old life or even ways of being perceived in the world. It is different to come into a workplace and be perceived as a single person and then be perceived as a married person, especially if you are a woman or someone who was raised by a woman in our society. And people approach you, perceive you, view you through the lens of who your partner is as well. You are no longer just a single person out in the world. You are a person attached to another person. And so it's not what are you doing tonight, it's what are you and your partner doing tonight. And that's a big shift, a big difference that we don't necessarily acknowledge is also, or can be, a grief event. You may grieve friendship things related to getting married as well, so disconnection from friends who are still single, or being the first in your friend group to marry, that's one kind of isolation, or being the last in your friend group to marry, that is another sort of isolation, or can be when it comes to grief. Another one that many, many people mention, and I'm so happy that this is becoming part of cultural conversation right now, is parenthood. The grief of becoming a parent, a mother, father, anything, a caregiver for a child in your life. And welcoming a child into your world, whether through birth, adoption, fostering, is an extraordinary thing to have. But parents often grieve, especially new parents, the loss of pre-parent identity or lifestyle, autonomy, and even sleep. Sleep is a thing you can absolutely grieve. And there is grief in recognizing that your life will never be just yours ever again. Sort of like marriage, it will always include this other being, but more importantly, this is a being that you are obligated and duty bound to care for and to nourish and to raise into a good person in the world. There can also be grief in being seen as, before anything else, a mother, a father, a caregiver, or a parent before any of your other identities. For instance, you may be perceived as a mom when you may absolutely have interests and desires and hobbies and questions and pursuits outside of being a parent. But again, the world sort of sees you first through that lens of motherhood or parenthood, and that is a big conversation that's happening culturally across much of social media, at least what I've seen these days, and that's something that's worth talking about. Another one, number 4 here, is a new job or promotion. You may have worked really, really hard to land a new role at your company or to shift into one at a different company or to open your own business, but now you might be grieving old coworkers or rhythms or commutes or your professional comfort zone. Like, I knew what that job was. I knew what that role was. Yes, I left it. I wanted to leave it, but whew, that was cushy back there. And where I am now is not so cushy. There is uncertainty in moving into what's next. And identity shifts can happen here as well. And I will say, especially with jobs, although it can apply to parenthood, graduation, marriage, things like that, if finances are involved, you might grieve on a money level too. There is grief that comes with a pay cut, of course, but there can also be grief in having more money to manage, especially if other people are dependent on you financially. I'm thinking children, family members, if you're caring for those who are outside of the country, things of that nature. Having more money is not always a blessing, and it can be something worth grieving. The next one I'll mention is moving to a new house. Maybe your new house is your dream home, but it also still means saying goodbye to wherever you lived before, familiar neighborhoods, routines, smells, sounds, again, commutes, walkable things, even joyful moves that you very much want come with grief. You may have moved just down the block or across town or to a whole new country, but a change in your metaphorical nest is taxing on your brain and heart and mind and body. And this can leave you feeling unsettled for much longer after the boxes are unpacked. You think, why haven't I settled in? It might be grief. It might be that there is something here that needs to be mourned, that needs to be released. Another one I'll say, and this is more of a product of the internet age, but I imagine it was true, mid-century, turn of the century, even before that, and that is fame or going viral. And I will say that it's very easy to glamorize attention and influence, but there is also a sort of grief in losing privacy or the invisibility of not really being known. The way people see you changes, and you may mourn in big ways and small ways, having endless free time to create or exist without eyeballs on your every move, or keeping track of how long it's been since you've been online or been in public spaces. You might also grieve not knowing whether or not connections with other people, friends, family members, people who come into your life, are rooted in, are they trying to gain something from me? Do they just want to be close to me or have proximity to me in order to get something for themselves? Or do they actually want real, genuine relationship to me? You may also feel a constant pressure to record or document your life where you didn't before, and that is grief-worthy. And you might miss having the ability to have experiences just away from a camera. And the last thing I'll say on this one is, if you have an agent or a publicist or a manager, you might also mourn a time when you were only accountable to yourself, when a time where you were like handled. There was a time when only you handled yourself, and now someone else is handling you, your affairs, potentially your money, potentially your schedule, potentially your relationships to other people. There can be a grief for missing a time before that, despite being grateful for or very happy about success or fame. The last one I'll say is personal growth, and this is one that surprises a lot of grieving people, because many grieving people want to be out of the immediacy and the sort of the acute pain of grief. They're like, I want to grow, I want to heal because it means I will not be suffering. But I think a lot of grieving people are surprised that they also sometimes miss the early days of their grief. There is sort of a healing heartbreak in saying goodbye to old versions of yourself, even the version of yourself that was struggling. There's a kind of loss, a kind of mourning in letting go of survival patterns or friends or rituals or coping mechanisms that kept you safe at some time or another. And said another way, there is grief in the process of outgrowing, in the process of growing up or healing, even if that healing is taking you in a direction that you very, very much want to go. I know this episode can kind of come across as a bummer, so what I want to acknowledge is that this does not mean you shouldn't celebrate the incredible accomplishments of your life, your wins. Recognizing hidden grief of like, oh, in gaining this or achieving this, I'm saying goodbye to this, it does not mean you need to stop wanting more or start fearing good things. A lot of grieving people talk about waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I do not want to give you any more shoes to be afraid of in the future. What it means is simply this, is that every gain in your life includes a loss, and that every loss includes space to be felt. It is not a bad thing. It is not me piling more grief onto your plate. You can have a graduation party, absolutely, and feel so on top of the world and so puffed up with pride for everything you've achieved, and also cry about the fact that this is the last time you will be with your very close college friends, potentially ever again, especially if you're all moving to different places or have job offers at different companies and so on and so forth. It does get harder to stay in touch when you're not in the same geographical location all the time. That is something worth grieving. You can feel incredible, deep love for a newborn, for a baby, for a child that has come into your life, and also long for your pre-baby self. And you can toast to your promotion at a big fancy restaurant and also miss and grieve the relationships you had with old coworkers, being in the loop of the water cooler gossip, for instance, or having that one coworker you knew could always be counted on for a good joke or to stand up for you in meetings. You can grieve all of that in addition to being happy for the things that are happening in your life. And this is what emotional honesty, telling the truth about, as my wife says, the all of the everything, that is what that looks like. Society, sadly, still has this mindset, and I'm hoping we're close to breaking it, that more is always, always, always better. There's nothing bad about more. That's consumeristic, it's capitalistic, it's individualistic, it is so many things that are not necessarily good for us. And a lot of the reason that hidden grief, this gained grief, hurts so much is that it is invisible or unspoken about in a culture, in a society, I'm talking about the United States largely here, that is obsessed with growth. Because we're told that success is linear, that milestones are only ever good, and that if you've leveled up or glowed up, you should be grateful. not sad. But that is not how human emotions work. We are all complicated people, and loss and gain are not opposites. They are two sides of the same coin. And when society only acknowledges the gain, the loss has nowhere to go. So it shows up in sneaky ways through fatigue or numbness or irritability or even shame. And you might be grieving a gain without even knowing it. And what I want to reiterate here is this is not meant to add to your grief. This perspective is meant to free you, because if you are already grieving something big, and I sense you are if you're listening to this podcast, divorce, death, diagnosis, breakup, you might be thinking, oh yeah, great. Thanks, Shelby, for pointing out even more loss that I did not ask to process. I want you to know this. This perspective is not meant to overwhelm you, to add more grief to the pile. This is meant to empower you, because if I can flip the script a little bit on you, if you have made it through any major transition in your life, positive or negative, you have already survived grief. You have done this before. You grieved your childhood when you moved through adolescence. You grieved your school life when you graduated, whether that's high school or college, or something bigger. You may have grieved your singleness when you got married. You may have grieved your relationship when you experienced a platonic or a romantic breakup. You grieved your freedom, potentially, when you became a caregiver, whether that's for children or parents or pets. And you have probably, if I had to guess, grieved a role or a title or a home or a place or a dream many, many times over. Said another way, this is not your first grief rodeo. Your past hidden losses, your past gain griefs, served as experience, as a sort of training for the losses that you're facing today. You have grieved before. And whatever you're grieving right now, or whoever you're grieving right now, you have done this already, even if you didn't know to call it grief at the time. That means you already know how to survive change, and that you are not, as so many grieving people say and fear, starting from square one. In some form or fashion, you have grieved before, in some iteration of your life before loss. And this goodbye that you are grieving right now, whatever it is, again, death, divorce, diagnosis, this is not your first goodbye. This is not your first time having to part with something precious to you. I hope that prompts you to think a little bit, because you could go back and ask yourself, okay, if I grieved my college friends in a way after graduation, what lessons from that can I take into my grief for my best friend now? Or if I have grieved the breakup of an engagement in the past, how can I take that into grieving singlehood into marriage, if that's applicable to your life? How can you take past lessons of grieving and surviving things, because you've already done it? You have already had some experience with grief, whether or not you knew to call it grief at the time. How can you take the things that you learned and the ways that you coped and the people you looked to for help and inspiration and guidance? How can you pull them forward into the future where you are right now? And another reframe I'll offer you before we go today is that there is also gain within your losses. So just like every gain includes a loss, every loss includes a gain. And this is not, I want to be uber clear here, this is not a toxic positivity message being like, okay, with your loss, your person who died, your divorce you went through, whatever diagnosis befell you, we can just say, look at the bright side, or look at these gains. This is not me toxic positivity messaging, painting over your grief. This is about widening your field of view. How can you tell the entire truth of what's happening right now? And so asking yourself, in the midst of what I've lost, what is the other side of the coin? What have I gained in this experience, in this loss, even if it's small or invisible to other people? So for instance, your person may have died, your relationship ended, your health changed, your dream dissolved, and still some new things or some gains may be possible. Many, many grievers share this experience of, I am no longer caregiving, so now I have time and energy to go back to school, to rebuild friendships, to potentially return home if you were caregiving in someone else's house or at a care facility or in another country or state. If a relationship ended, whether through breakup or divorce, you may be rediscovering your own autonomy or reconnecting to parts of yourself that you lost while you were trying to keep the relationship together. If you have received a life-changing diagnosis, you might now have clarity or the validation to prioritize what really matters, especially if there is a time limit now, a clear one, on your life. If someone you love has died, you might find yourself living more honestly, more tenderly, or with greater urgency than before. One of my clients in Life After Loss Academy once called grief the great reprioritizer, and I thought that was a really great way of her recognizing that a loved one's death really made her recognize this is what matters, this is what's important, and this is really what's not. And that can be counted as a gain inside of grief. Again, these perspectives are not replacements for the pain of loss. This is not me trying to reach into your suffering and take that away from you, because that is not a power that I have. They're not successes that make the fact that you're grieving magically okay, but they are real. They exist alongside the pain, alongside the suffering, alongside the grief. And naming them can feel like a lifeline or like something sturdy when it feels like everything else is crumbling underneath your feet. Before we wrap up today, I want to just say one more time that naming the hidden gain grief matters. Naming what we are losing as we succeed and achieve and accomplish and begin again. That matters. When we ignore the hidden grief underneath life's successes and achievements, we deny ourselves a full picture of what's really going on in our lives. And when we try to rush past our emotions or focus only on the positives in a milestone, we bypass reflecting. And that kind of reflection is one thing that helps us honor all the places that grief shows up in our lives, the little quiet things, and honestly, the really big things too. And when we name hidden grief, we get to tell the whole truth about what's happening. And that's one of my favorite things to do in grief. It really breathes an authenticity and a whole human portrait into what's happening in your life right now. Yes, you get to acknowledge and celebrate and be overjoyed and so proud of what you have gained. But you also get to name and grieve and have conversations about and release what you miss, what you're going to leave behind, or what you've already left behind as a result of this gain. And I will say, if you want to explore this idea in greater depth or just gain some more tools for living life after loss and kind of seeing the both and of everything, I encourage you to check out my free workshop on my website. If you go to shelbyforsythia.com, it's just in the right-hand corner there. It says free workshop, and you can sign up with your email and I'll email it to you so you can watch it at your leisure. You do not have to sit through something live right away, because I know that's something a lot of grievers do not want to do. I will email it to you and you can watch it whenever you're ready. And inside the workshop, I basically give you 3 tools for: 1, stabilize yourself after devastating loss so you can explore your grief from more solid ground. 2, use 2 words, so another word tool, because we all know I'm very passionate about words on this show. Use 2 words to give yourself instant self-compassion, even on your hardest days. So a lot of times we find ourselves judging ourselves in grief. This will ease up the pressure on that. And to 3, shift your perspective from grief as an obstacle or something to get over to grief as a long-term relationship, so that you can build a life that feels meaningful to you. As I often say on the show, you build a life you love from the life that loss forced you to live. Because whether we like it or not, this is a non-consensual part of being alive. You will be changed. That's for certain. Death, taxes, and being changed. Life inevitably changes us. Some of those changes we want and crave and aim for, and other ones are the most heart-wrenching things we ever go through. Some of these changes we celebrate, and some of them we mourn. And every single one of them carries the echoes of a gain and the echoes of a goodbye. Sometimes hundreds of goodbyes in a single change. And recognizing them, giving name to them, acknowledging that gain grief exists, does not mean that something's wrong with you or that you're incapable of joy or happiness or gratitude. What it does mean is that you're aware of the full portrait of life and the gain and the loss and the growth and the grief and the both and the and. And that is one of my favorite beautiful human things. So again, if this episode resonated with you, check out my free workshop. It's called Grow Through Grief, 3 Ways to Stop Feeling Stuck and Start Moving Forward at shelbyforsythia.com. And I'll also put a link in the show notes. I would love to know if and how this episode resonated with you, if you have accomplished something or achieved something or won something, and you're like, I think there's a little bit of grief here, or you saw some of yourself in this, or you've been having conversations about this with friends and family, do get in touch. And again, you can do that at shelbyforsythia.com. Thank you so much for being here with me today and for taking time to acknowledge the grief within the gains. And I hope in the midst of the celebration, or maybe in a small pocket of devoted time after the celebration, you will also make time for your grief. That's all for this episode of Grief Grower. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're looking for grief support beyond this show, you can find free workshops, blog articles, and my signature What's Your Grief Support Style quiz at shelbyforsythia.com/links. And if you'd like to get support from me for your unique loss experience, you can join us in Life After Loss Academy, which is my online course and community. As a student, I'll walk you through my 5-step grief framework for rebuilding life after loss, and you can get live coaching from me every single week to answer your questions. Replays are always available if you can't attend live. If this podcast felt validating, comforting, educational, or otherwise helpful to you in your grief, please subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I love reading what you write. And be sure to share Grief Grower with a friend, because you never know what someone you love is going through. Grief Grower is hosted by me, Shelby Forsythia, with theme music by Addie Goldstein. Until next time, Grief Growers, I see you. I am so proud of you and the work that you're doing in the world. And I love you. Because even through grief, we are growing.